America turns 250 this year. Except in this timeline, there is no America. Not the one you know. On the night of August 29, 1776, George Washington and 9,000 Continental soldiers stood on the Brooklyn shore of the East River with the British Army at their backs and the Royal Navy blocking their escape. A thick fog rolled in from the south and gave them cover. Every single man crossed to Manhattan unseen. In our timeline, that fog saved the American Revolution. What if the fog never came? Washington is captured. The Continental Army, already demoralized after a disastrous defeat, fragments within weeks. By November, negotiations begin. By early 1777, the colonies returned to British authority under a charter granting significant self-governance, but not independence. 250 years later, this is what the world looks like. 250 years later, this is what the world looks like. To understand how close it was, you need to understand what the Battle of Long Island actually was. It was a catastrophe. The largest British army ever assembled in North America, 32,000 professional soldiers, had just destroyed the Continental Army's defensive position in Brooklyn in a single day. Washington lost more than 1,400 men killed, wounded, or captured. His troops were terrified. The British commanders, Howe and Cornwallis, had the Continental Army surrounded on three sides with the East River at their backs. General Howe chose not to press the assault on August 28. He was a cautious commander, and he expected surrender. The next morning, Washington began his famous retreat across the river under cover of darkness and fog. The fog is the POD. It is documented. John Adams wrote about it. Washington's officers wrote about it. The fog of August 29, 1776, was one of the most consequential weather events in human history. A clear night and Washington's army is gone. The revolution dies in its third month. In this timeline, Howe presses the assault at first light. The fog never comes. Washington is captured by noon. The Continental Army, leaderless and demoralized, fragments within weeks. By November, negotiations begin. The point of divergence is one night of weather over a river. Washington's capture does not immediately end the war. John Adams argues for continued resistance. Thomas Jefferson is present. The intellectual leadership of the revolution is intact, it is the military that has collapsed. But the military was the revolution. Without Washington's army in the field, every other colony looks at the math and arrives at the same conclusion: Britain has 32,000 professional soldiers and the world's most powerful navy. The Continental Army had one remarkable general and 9 months of momentum. Both are now gone. The negotiated peace of 1777, which historians in this timeline call the Philadelphia Compact, is not a capitulation. Franklin is at the table, and Franklin is a genius. What he extracts is significant: an elected colonial parliament with genuine legislative power, no taxation without representation enshrined in the charter, independent colonial courts, no permanent British garrison in colonial homes. What he does not get is independence. The colonies remain under the crown. There is no American republic. There is, instead, the Dominion of North America. Jefferson never writes the Declaration of Independence. Or rather, he writes it, but it goes into a drawer. He publishes it years later, as a private philosophical essay. All men are created equal becomes a legal footnote rather than a founding document. That single fact will echo for 250 years. In our timeline, the American Revolution's success directly triggered the French Revolution. The mechanism is financial. France spent itself into bankruptcy supporting the American cause. When French soldiers returned home having fought for liberty, égalité, fraternité alongside American revolutionaries, they brought those ideas with them. The French government, broke and delegitimized, couldn't contain what followed. In this timeline, France never enters the American War. There is no American war to enter. The French Revolution still happens. The underlying conditions, an insolvent state, a hungry population, an aristocracy that has forgotten how to govern, have nothing to do with events in North America. But what happens in 1789 looks different without the American model behind it. There is no declaration of the rights of man in the same form. No appeal to self-evident truths because those words were never enshrined anywhere. The French Revolution is more purely violent, less philosophically coherent, and Napoleon rises faster into a larger vacuum. In our world, he had to pay lip service to Republican ideals. In this one, there are no Republican ideals worth the name. He seizes power not in 1799 but in 1793. He is more nakedly imperial from the start. The result is a longer, bloodier Napoleonic conflict. It ends not with Waterloo and a negotiated peace but with military exhaustion, leaving France broken and Europe's monarchies more entrenched than in our world. Washington's capture didn't spare Europe from revolutionary chaos. It made Europe's chaos worse. The Dominion of North America develops quickly. The same economic energy that drove American growth in our timeline is present here. The land is still vast. The population grows. Industry arrives in New England. Cotton still dominates the South. But slavery ends differently. Britain abolishes slavery across its empire in 1833. In our timeline, the United States, independent, sovereign, doesn't follow suit. Slavery in America survives until the Civil War of 1861, killing 620,000 people. In this timeline, the Dominion of North America is part of the British Empire in 1833. The Slavery Abolition Act applies. The Southern planters argue. They threaten secession. The British government sends a fleet to Charleston Harbor and the argument ends. American slavery ends by parliamentary decree in 1833. 30 years earlier than in our world. Without a war. This is not a fairy tale. The apprenticeship system that followed British emancipation was deeply exploitative. Freedmen were bound to their former enslavers for years under different legal terms. Structural racism in housing, voting, and economic opportunity persisted for generations. But there was no civil war. The 620,000 who died in that war, they lived. Their children were born. The psychological wound that still shapes American political culture in our world, the wound of a nation that fought and bled and still couldn't resolve the question, doesn't exist in the same form here. The Industrial Revolution arrives on the same schedule. The same resources, the same labor, the same entrepreneurial energy. What's different is the political culture it operates inside. No robber barons in quite the American mode. British parliamentary tradition has better developed mechanisms for regulating monopolies. The Gilded Age still happens, the inequality is still real, but the regulatory response arrives sooner. And there is no civil war. Which changes everything about what North America carries into the 20th century. In 2026, the Dominion of North America has a population of 420 million people. It is the wealthiest single territory on Earth. It has been a self-governing democracy since 1867, when the Dominion Act gave it full parliamentary sovereignty while retaining the Commonwealth link. The king is the head of state. A prime minister runs the government. The Parliament in Philadelphia is one of the most powerful legislative bodies in the world. It is not the United States of America. It is something stranger and, in some ways, more stable. There is no American Constitution in this world. No First Amendment. No Second Amendment. No Supreme Court in the American sense. There is, instead, a constitutional tradition rooted in British parliamentary law, older in some ways, more flexible, less prone to the legal absolutism that American constitutional culture produces. Freedom of speech exists, but it has been expanded and contracted by Parliament over centuries rather than frozen by an 18th century document. Gun ownership is regulated as it is in modern Britain and Canada. The state has more latitude to act, individuals have fewer enumerated rights but more practical protections. Whether this is better or worse depends entirely on what you value. The world order looks different. Without an independent United States becoming a superpower, the 20th century has no American century. The Commonwealth, Britain and the Dominion together, fills some of that role. But WW1 still kills 17 million people. The underlying tensions of European nationalism and imperial competition had nothing to do with events in Philadelphia. What changes is WW2. The Dominion's manufacturing capacity, committed from the start, ends the war in 1943, 2 years early. The death camps run for 2 years less. Conservative estimates put the lives saved at 1.5 million. There is no Hiroshima. The Manhattan Project was built largely by refugee European scientists working in an independent United States. That path doesn't exist here. Nuclear weapons are developed by the Commonwealth but reach operational capability in 1948, after the war is over. They are never used in combat. The Dominion of North America in 2026 is, by most material measures, among the best places on Earth to live. High income, strong parliamentary rights, universal healthcare copied from Britain's National Health Service in 1948, a gun culture that never developed in the American direction. What it doesn't have is the American mythology. No frontier spirit. No city on a hill. No constitutional absolutism. No culture war tracing its roots to a founding document that half the country reads one way and half reads another. It also doesn't have the specific restlessness that came from building a nation from scratch, the recklessness that produced both Silicon Valley and January 6th. The tech industry exists but operates inside a more regulated, more parliamentary tradition. The disruptions are real, but smaller. The monopolies are more accountable. The rhetoric is quieter. You might prefer this world. Or you might find it slightly suffocating. That reaction tells you something about why the American experiment mattered, and what it cost. The American Republic was born in a fog. Literally. The nation that shaped the modern world was preserved in its infancy by a weather event that its founders attributed to divine providence and historians attribute to a low-pressure system over the Atlantic. Remove the fog, and you don't just remove the United States. You remove the template. The Declaration of Independence. The Constitution. The Bill of Rights. The idea that a nation could be founded on a philosophical argument rather than on dynastic inheritance. Jefferson's words were not original philosophy. Locke had said it. The Enlightenment had been building to it for a century. What Jefferson did was put it in a founding document, make it the official premise of a nation that became a superpower. That act of writing it down gave those ideas a weight they had never carried before. In the alternate world, the same ideas circulate. In pamphlets, in Parliament, in law. But they were never the founding premise of a superpower. Never the thing carved on the wall of a memorial that a billion people visited. Never the argument that a soldier carries into battle, or a lawyer quotes before a court, or a child memorizes in school. Ideas need containers. The American founding was a very powerful container. And it took one night of fog to build it. The fog saved a revolution. The revolution saved an idea. The idea made the world. Would you trade this world, with its Bill of Rights and its Civil War, its Silicon Valley and its January 6th, for the quieter, more orderly dominion that almost was? Until the vault opens again, subscribe to the Alternate Archive.